Hi, I'm Tom Brookshire.
And I'm Al Meltzer, sitting in for Pat Summerall, who couldn't be with us this week. Last weekend, the NFL's 8 playoff teams narrowed down to the Final Four. And in this, the final show of the season, we're going to show you in some detail and from a variety of different camera angles just how all 4 of last weekend's games were decided. Any particular surprises for you in any of the 4 games last weekend?
Yeah, I was surprised it was so easy in a couple of cases. Minnesota really taking care of the Cardinals rather easily after the Cardinals did most of the work in the first half, but I was surprised that the Vikings beat them 30-14. Yes, it was.
Oakland and Miami, what can you say about it?
Oh, just super game, and I've been a Raider fan for too long, but the Raiders look like they might even beat Pittsburgh and go to the final as far as I'm concerned. That was really a great game.
Well, Pittsburgh did a job on Buffalo. Terry Bradshaw said it was his best game ever.
I still think they win with defense. Somewhere along the line, their defense convinces somebody to stop moving the ball. Now, how about the Rams beating the Redskins late? And normally, Washington plays very well in that 3rd and 4th period. I was shocked at that one.
You're shocked the Redskins had that many turnovers?
Yes, I was. 3 interceptions by Jurgensen is an unusual thing.
We'll be right back with This Week in the NFL after this message.
Well, Al, for the 6th time in the last 7 years, the Minnesota Vikings claimed their accustomed spot in the playoffs. While their opponents this year, of course, the Cardinals, well, they had not appeared in championship competition since they were known as the old Chicago Cardinals back in '48, I believe.
Yeah, and you'll agree, if there's any single common denominator that separates the winners from the losers in playoffs, it's got to be the experience. And it's that yearly big game experience which makes the Vikings mighty tough to beat up there in Minnesota.
Up in Minnesota, pro football is more an event than a spectator sport. And if you think the Vikings are tough, you ought to see their fans. When the playoff fever is on them, they come out to the Met and warm up in old-fashioned free-for-alls just for drill. But when they begin to take the wraps off for the big game, Minnesota Viking fans, who are among the hardiest and most loyal in the league, get 100% behind their heroes in purple to root them on over the invaders. This year, the Interlopers were the surprise team in the NFC, the big play, exciting St. Louis Cardinals. But the Cardinals opened action, taking a page from the Vikings book on creative defense, as middle linebacker Mark Arneson, number 57, stole his Fran-Tarkenton try for Jim Lash. This halted the Vikes' first sustained drive. St. Louis quarterback Jim Hart then went right at the gut of the Vikings' D, practicing the old philosophy that the way to beat Minnesota is to run straight at them. But Hart could not resist his big play air game for long, and on this play, he hooked up with Terry Metcalf for 29 yards, well into Minnesota territory. But there, Minnesota choked off the St. Louis drive using a defense specifically designed for the playoffs. A repeat will show that Minnesota used 5 down linemen: Carl Eller, Doug Sutherland, Alan Page, Jeff Seaman, and Bob Lertzema with 6 defensive backs. And Lertzema, number 75, came open to smother the Cardinals' first offensive threat. But the Cardinal drive did shift the advantage to St. Louis, as twice from midfield, punter Hal Roberts booted the ball dead inside the Minnesota 5. And on this one, the Cards almost got a break. The ball took an odd bounce off Bill Brown's leg, but Brownie recovered and the Vikings hung on until on their first possession of the second quarter, St. Louis took advantage of its good field position. First, Hart hit Earl Thomas, and then Hart himself sustained the threat when he scrambled for a first down at the Viking 14. One play later, Hart found Earl Thomas wide open, and St. Louis took a 7-0 lead. A view from a slightly different angle shows that Hart was unhurried, and he had time to wait for Thomas to diagonal across the field and come clear, accounting for the first score of the game. The Vikings wasted little time in mourning as Fran Tarkenton sent Chuck Foreman hurrying to the Cardinal secondary for a 19-yard gain to get Minnesota going. But the play that kept the drive alive was this pure Tarkenton jump pass to Dave Osborne, bringing the ball to the St. Louis 33. From there, Minnesota played nickel and dime for 3 and 4 yards at a time until Francis sprinted out to his right and found John Gilliam soaring for the catch to complete a 16-yard scoring play, tying the game at 7. But with time dwindling, the half was not yet over as Hart moved his mates upfield. The Cards moved 66 yards in 43 seconds, only to run out of time at the Minnesota 6. From there, Jim Bakken missed a 23-yard field goal attempt, leaving the score not at half 7-7. After the intermission, Jim Hart's hot hand turned cool, and this poorly thrown ball was picked off by Jeff Wright at the top of the 3rd period. Although Wright returned the ball to the St. Louis 44, the Vikings had to settle for a 37-yard field goal from Fred Cox, and they had a 10-7 advantage. But on the Cardinals' next possession, Minnesota had better luck, as Terry Metcalf, trying to sweep Wright, lost control of the football, and Nate Wright, number 43, turned the error into a 17-7 lead for the Vikings. A closer look will show that Carl Eller broke down the timing of the play and loosened the ball in Metcalf's grasp. Alan Page dislodged it, and the Vikings had 7 game-breaking points from a defense which has contributed so much to the Minnesota Vikings' success under head coach Bud Grant. On their next series, the Minnesota offense took its turn, and 3 times Tarkenton fired long against the Cardinals' fine cornerback Norm Thompson. And on the 3rd try, he connected with John Gilliam. A missed extra point made the score Vikings 23, Cardinals 7 after 7.5 minutes of the 3rd quarter. And as John Gilliam trotted upfield to receive congratulations from Fran Tarkenton, the St. Louis Cardinals had to be rehearsing these bitter lessons for next year, reminding themselves that the playoffs are a 60-minute season, permitting not the slightest lapse in concentration. Sparked by their sudden surge, the Vikes did not allow Jim Hart and the Cardinals even a first down until the final play of the quarter. And then Jim Hart heaved long desperately. The ball fluttered in the leaden Minnesota sky and fell short, or it too would have been in vain. But Mel Gray came back and got it, reviving hopes for the Cards' dormant offense. But a second look reveals under what pressure Jim Hart launched his prayer. But even as he followed the football downfield, Jim Hart, essentially a rhythm passer, must have known that he was playing the Vikings game, that he was being forced to hurry his patterns and his release. And this is not the same successful rhythm which had brought the Cardinals and their big play attacks so far, so fast. Pressure, too, was affecting all the veins and arteries of the Cardinals' offensive system. And what once had been sure and easy was now uncertain and difficult. Meanwhile, Fran Tarkenton had his short stroke offense in perfect tune. And the cooled-off Cardinals' big playmakers had to stand aside and watch as their private hopes and championship dreams all but dissolved. With 12 minutes gone in the last quarter, Chuck Foreman completed a 57-yard drive with this 4-yard burst. Trailing 30-7 with nothing to win but the memory of having tried to the last, Jim Hart mounted his final thrust. Oddly, not until now did Hart turn to his great tight end, Jackie Smith. With only a minute remaining, Terry Metcalf broke into the end zone, and the St. Louis Cardinals had their pride and the Minnesota Vikings had their victory, 30-14. A victory won for 60 full minutes of concentrated effort and attention to detail. A victory for experience over exuberance, and a victory ensuring one last week of rock-tough football both inside and outside the Met.
As Paul Warfield said after last Saturday's game, all good things have to come to an end, and I guess there's never been a champion who lived forever. Not even the Miami Dolphins of Coach Don Shula, Tom.
Well, that's true, Al. Don Shula said it was the toughest loss he had ever suffered as a coach. But he also gave the Oakland Raiders credit for pulling one of the best football games out that he or anyone else had ever had anything to do with.
When the world champion Miami Dolphins emerged in the Oakland Coliseum, there was electricity in the air. For this would be a rematch of last year's AFC Championship game, the one which put Miami in the Super Bowl for the third consecutive year. And this would be a rematch of what many consider to be the two best teams in pro football. The Raiders were ready. But on the opening kickoff, through the haze came a white wave of Miami blockers, followed by Rookie of the Year candidate Nat Moore, number 89. After precisely 15 seconds of play, the world champions led by a touchdown thanks to an 89-yard shocker by number 89, Nat Moore. Moments later, Ken Stabler attempted his first pass of the day. Nick Monaconti's tip to Dick Anderson had the Dolphins in position to put the Raiders in a deep, deep hole early. And on third down, Bob Greasy went for the juggler with an end zone bomb to Paul Warfield. Unlike previous well-documented playoff games, the Dolphins had come up empty on their first series, and on the Raiders' next series, Ken Stabler had similar problems. Through the entire first quarter and much of the second, neither team could put together a successful scoring drive, and both teams seemed a bit tight. Midway in the second period, the Raiders entered Miami territory for the first time in a run by Clarence Davis, a young man we'll see more of a little later. On third down from the 31, Ken Stabler had all the time he needed to go for the end zone. Charlie Smith's catch tied the game at 7-7. From our end zone camera, it's easy to dissect all the elements of a perfect play. Perfect protection plus perfect pass plus perfect catch equals touchdown. On Miami's next series, Bob Greasy had an opportunity for another perfect touchdown, but his pass was offline. The Dolphins had to settle for a 3-point lead at the half. But more important than the score to the Dolphins was the fact that, due to first-half knee injuries, they had lost half of their defensive secondary. Curtis Johnson and number 13, Jake Scott, their all-pro free safety. Early in the second half, the passing combination of Ken Stabler to Fred Biletnikoff temporarily took over the show. A first down pass took the Raiders into Dolphin territory, and then Stabler went right back to Biletnikoff deep on the other side.
Bolitnikov's touchdown was ruled no good by just the length of the toes on Fred's left foot. But such a play deserves another look, this time from the end zone camera position. Ken Stabler knows a good thing when he sees one, and later in the same drive he again went for Bolitnikov in the right corner. This time everything was legal, and the fickle finger of fate allowed fantastic Freddie to put Oakland in the lead for the first time in the game midway in the third quarter. For 10 years now, the 6'1" wide receiver from Florida State has quietly been glue fingering hundreds of receptions. And this one, like the last, deserves another look from the end zone position. On the next series, Bob Greasy and the Dolphins got a break on a long third down pass to Jim Kick. Number 41, Phil Villapiano, was called for pass interference. And on the next play, Greasy jumped on the opportunity. Paul Warfield's catch was made easily because, as we can see from behind the play, his defender had fallen down when Warfield made his cut to the corner. At the end of three quarters, Miami was back on top 16-14. In the fourth period, Bob Greasy again exploited the left side, where Nehemiah Wilson was playing in place of the injured All-Pro Willie Brown. Paul Warfield came up with a 20-yarder, but the next time, Warfield dropped a third down pass and forced the Dolphins to settle for a field goal and a 19-14 lead. With just under 5 minutes to play and trailing by 5, Ken Stabler started from his own 17-yard line, first hitting Fred Bolitnikov for a first down, and then airing it out to the NFL's new home run king, Cliff Branch. Cliff Branch's 14th touchdown of the year had suddenly catapulted Oakland back into the lead, 21-19, and Raiderland went wild. But the Dolphins had good reason to cast a wary eye at such proceedings, for Branch's great catch was dangerously close to being called a trap ball. With just 4.5 minutes to play, Bob Greasy and the Dolphins needed 3 points to go ahead and 7 to put the game away, barring any unforeseen miracles on the part of the Raiders, that is. Greasy's first play went to Miami's new Mr. Clutch, Nat Moore. Nat Moore had the Dolphins in Oakland territory, and then another clutch rookie took over, Benny Malone, number 32. Benny Malone's determined running seesawed Miami ahead again. And from the viewpoint of the defense, we can see just how determined Benny Malone was. Again, trailing by 5 with 2 minutes to play, Ken Stabler needed a touchdown to win, and he twice went to Fred Bolitnikov, who caught 8 in the game for 122 yards. After having had his first pass of the day intercepted, Ken Stabler hit on 20 of 30 for 293 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not a bad day against the complex zones of the world champion Dolphins. With just 35 seconds left, the Raiders had the ball at the Miami 8, with no timeouts left, and the world champions were faced with either stopping Ken Stabler or relinquishing their title. Suddenly, somehow, Miraculously, the ball materialized in the hands of Clarence Davis in the end zone, and it seems only fitting that Ken Stabler's 30th touchdown pass of the year be given another look, this time from the same angle that most of the nation had, on the Saturday evening before Christmas, 1974. There are many ways to show elation, and various members of the Oakland Raider family showed quite a variety of those ways. Some people who have never been to the summit may finally be on their way, while others who have been there before quietly walk away. But for those who have waited the longest, the victory always seems most sweet. And that's the way it was when the Oakland Raiders dethroned the world champions in Super Bowl 8.5 on the Saturday evening before Christmas, 1974.
Well, last Sunday in Pittsburgh, Al, the Steelers looked about as good as I've ever seen them, I think.
Well, they certainly did, Tom, and I believe the reason for that awesomeness is the newly found confidence and cool that Terry Bradshaw has at quarterback.
Well, Terry certainly had one of the best games of his career, and I believe he has become a better all-around leader on the field, too, where he wasn't at one time.
Well, that's a quality that forced the Buffalo Bills to close out their season 2 weeks short of their avowed goal.
'Twas the day of the playoffs in Pittsburgh, PA, a time for the Bills to get down and pray. For the steel curtain was hung by the fans with great care in hopes that Greenwood, Holmes green and white, might cause the Bills to wish they weren't there. But the Bills were there, and surprisingly enough on this day, it was the Pittsburgh attack that shone as Mel Blount returned the opening kickoff 42 yards that put the Steelers in good position right away. Terry Bradshaw exuded newfound poise and calm to go along with his great strength, and the Steelers capped their first possession with a Roy Girello field goal. Undaunted by the steel curtain, Joe Ferguson, number 12, brought Buffalo right back when he hit tight end Paul Seymour for a 22-yard score. A repeat shows that the pass was perfectly thrown, but Seymour's size and strength were a positive factor in his reaching the goal line. However, the 7-3 Buffalo lead was not to last long. Mixing his plays well and taking much upon himself, Bradshaw could not be stopped except by his own teammates, in this case, number 50, Jim Clack. Despite such miscues, Bradshaw remained imperturbable, and early in the second quarter, with a day and a half to throw, he struck 27 yards through the air to number 20, Rocky Blyer. The Steelers were never headed. Thanks again to a repeat, we see Bradshaw first faking a handoff to Blyer, who then circles downfield to arrive in a wide-open rendezvous with the ball. The next time Pittsburgh had the ball, Bradshaw sent number 88 Lynn Swan winging around in for a 25-yard pickup. Later in the drive, Swan almost took it in on this flat pass, which he high-stepped to the 1-yard line. Frank O'Harris finished the job by bullying in to put the Steelers on top 16-7. While the gold and black offense was whooping it up, the defense in the person of number 59 Jack Ham was swooping down on the juice, and O.J. was squeezed repeatedly. But when O.J. was stopped, number 34 Jim Braxton stepped in and ripped off a beautiful 30-yard gain. However, the run's effect was somewhat ruined by a fumble at the end, which Pittsburgh recovered. For the Bills, it was a time for eyes to glint pain and worry, because another Steelers score at this juncture could mean curtains. And curtains it was to be, as Bradshaw could perform no wrong. When his passes were off, his receivers made great catches, as Rocky Bleier did here. Like a dreadnought, the steel machine continued to roll and fly. Bradshaw was pinpoint perfect, and Lynn Swan's diving catch left the Steelers with only 4 yards to grind. Frank O'Harris polished those 4 yards off in a hurry to make the score 22-7. The Buffalo team's disgust was evident in their helpless complaining, and they obviously needed regrouping. But their first half torment was not to be eased, because once again Bradshaw had his offense looking goalward. In the first half alone, Bradshaw completed 10 of 14 for 166 yards, and this one was the shot that brought the Buffalo down. A beautiful pass and a leaping catch by number 87 Larry Brown put the Bills at the cliff's edge of defeat. The same play from another angle points up the Steelers' perfect timing and the helplessness to stop it that the Bills must have been feeling. For the third time in the first half, Frank O'Harris powered in to make the score 29-7. Along with good old Santa Chimp, the rest of the uproarious Steeler crowd realized that the second half would be a mere formality. The Bills started the third quarter with a renewed vigor on defense and allowed the black and gold none of their former explosiveness. On offense, Buffalo perked to life only momentarily, as Joe Ferguson led them on a well-conceived scoring drive that started with this strike to J.D. Hill. O.J. chipped in with his biggest play of the day, and for one of the few times all afternoon, his gliding, sliding style was allowed to flow. Ferguson to J.D. Hill again put the Bills within sight of a score. Then a 7-yard slant by O.J. brought them to within sniffing distance. And finally, it was Ferguson to O.J. again, and the Juice had the singular honor of making the score 29-14. A repeat of the play shows O.J. scoring what turned out to be the last points of the Buffalo Bills season. But Bradshaw and his assassins were still not satisfied. And again, Terry drove them downfield where Roy Girella popped another field goal. When in the final seconds, Joe Gillum replaced Terry, he too almost brought the Steelers in for a score. This run by Steve Davis, number 35, fell just inches short despite appearances. But the Pittsburgh Steelers showed up short nowhere at all last Sunday as they ousted the Bills from the playoffs 32-14. For the Bills, it was a disappointing ending to a good season, and they should remember that only one team will end its season without disappointment. Besides that, at least they've avoided the disagreeable job of having to cope with the Oakland Raiders in the boisterous Oakland Coliseum. But on the basis of last Sunday, one would say the Steelers look ready for anything.
Back on Monday night, 9th of December, the Washington Redskins had that do-or-die matchup with the Los Angeles Rams, and the Skins won at 23-17. And they assure themselves of a spot in the playoffs right there, Tom.
Well, that's right, Al. And last Sunday, it was the same very well familiarized teams that squared off once again. But this time, they both shared the same incentives, Super Bowl gold and Super Bowl glory.
With the many varied amusements and diversions of Southern California to occupy one's attention, it's no wonder that last Sunday's playoff game was simply another good time gathering of LA's sunshine devotees. And while the Rams were not likely to experience the loyalty bordering on the fanatical, typical of other NFL cities, their act was certainly good enough to draw 80,000 folks to the Coliseum for a relaxed afternoon of football, frisbees, and fun. But for the visitors' head coach George Allen, fun comes only from one source, and that's victory. But standing between the Redskins and their championship aspirations were the Los Angeles Rams, a team with an off-and-on offense and a rock-ribbed defense that, unlike the Redskins, had precious little successful postseason playoff experience. And it didn't take much time for the Redskins defenders to put the Rams on their tiptoes last Sunday, and they did it through intimidation. First by number 55, Chris Hamburger, and secondly by the helmet-wrenching hatchet shots of number 27, Ken Houston. But just as the Redskin defense was initially strong, so too was the Ram defense, led by number 85, Jack Youngblood. The best way, however, to understand the nature of the battle is to watch Billy Kilmer's expression as he loses a race for the sideline sanctuary. Right after Billy took his lumps, Ram quarterback James Harris got things together with a juggling pass connection to number 29, Harold Jackson. But the real nits and grits of the Ram drive was this Harris to Jackson combo that just barely squeezed through the Redskin zone. A super slow re-examination shows that, 1, there was never any doubt about the target, and 2, thank God number 37 Pat Fisher missed with his right cross as the Rams rifled themselves to the Skins' 14-yard line. 2 plays later, Mr. Harris set himself up again and pitched a first blood strike to number 80, Bob Klein, for a 7-0 lead. A replay shows the fantastic protection the NFC's number 2 ranked passer got on the play, and Mr. Klein crossing from his split position to outmaneuver number 23, Brig Owens, for the score that concluded the 82-yard drive. Seven points wasn't much to the NFC's highest scoring offense, however, and Billy Kilmer quickly countered with a 41-yarder to Charlie Taylor. At the 18, the drive stalled, And from there, Mike Bragg punched through a 35-yard field goal that made it anyone's game at 7-3. With the start of the second quarter, a collapsing pass pocket caused Billy Kilmer to commit a turnover. And suddenly the Rams were in point production position at the Skin 38-yard line. But the Redskin defense, led typically enough by Chris Hanberger, shut down the Rams' heralded running game, and soon the Burgundy and Gold were in position for yet another series of offensive attack. And on his first play, Billy Kilmer reached long for number 46, Frank Grant, whose broken stride cost the Redskins a touchdown. Following Grant's missed opportunity, Redskin defender Pat Fisher came down with another James Harris interception, and Ram coach Chuck Knox was almost beside himself as he envisioned his would-be halftime lead dissolve. But it wasn't easy for the Redskins, as twice Larry Brown explosions were harnessed short of pay dirt. Finally, however, number 44, Moses Denson, powered into the Ram end zone to lift the Skins over the Rams 10-7. A closer look at Denson's run shows the kind of pile-driving determination it often takes to score. And with all the playoff marbles up for grabs, both teams knew that the second half would be the most important 30 minutes of their football lives.
With the game so closely contested, the situation was ideally suited to George Allen's philosophy of forcing the opponent into game-deciding errors, huh?
Well, it would seem certainly to be that way, but Allen's team had the playoff experience, the maturity to take advantage of perhaps all of the things the Rams are going to do wrong about this thing.
As the second half began, the Rams began changing defenses and personnel to fluster and frustrate the usually unflappable Redskins. While the hard-hitting Rams bludgeoned the Redskins, the Los Angeles offense found the over-the-hill gang, and particularly number 27, Ken Houston, as pleasant as a punch in the face mask. However, it was a fumble by reliable Larry Brown, number 43, that paved the way for a second-half Ram renaissance. The turnover seemed to spur the Rams' forward wall, and they began to blow out the Redskins down deep for Jim Bertelsen. But the powder blue skies paled for the Rams when a James Harris touchdown pass to Bertelsen was voided by an offensive pass interference penalty. The mistake cost Los Angeles a touchdown, but two field goals by David Ray gave the Rams the lead for the first time since the first quarter, 13-10. While the Sunshine Supermen gambled in the heady glow of a three-point advantage, the Redskins gambled and slipped an old dog-eared joker into the deck. Sore-kneed and stiff-armed Sonny Jurgensen replaced Billy Kilmer, and he had but 15 minutes to turn defeat into victory. Marshaling all his skills and summoning up the competitive juices, Sonny sliced through the Ram zone as easy as pie. But the bloom on the Redskin rose wilted before the looming specter of Isaiah Robertson, number 58, who laid Washington's ambitions and Sonny's sturdy right arm to waste. Rushed hard, Jurgensen offered up the victory balloon that was snatched away by Robertson, who partied 59 yards to the clinching touchdown. On one big play, Isaiah Robertson stemmed the Burgundy tide and vaulted the Los Angeles Rams into the first title game since 1951. It was a glorious triumph for a team that was given little chance to defeat a team that humbled them just 2 weeks previous. Although James Harris had not fully refuted the criticism that gushed and spewed and demeaned his abilities after the John Hadle trade, he could lean on the arms of Isaiah Robertson and the rest of the formidable Ram defense in time of stress. While the young Rams are a team of many tomorrows, there may not be so many Sundays left for the Washington Redskins. They are a veteran team brimming with pride and character, and this galling loss will chill their spirits through a long winter of discontent.
Well, it's our last prediction time of the year, and Summerall failed to show up, and I don't blame him. I've got him beaten badly, Al.
30-31 Brookshire, 28-33 Summerall, by the way, just in case.
We're going to let you go 0-62 to start out on the Snyder, okay?
Yeah, but I do pretty good in these last games here. How about the NFC with the L.A. Rams and the Minnesota Vikings?
They're playing in Bloomington, which is a problem for Los Angeles. And I think the Viking offense is better than people have been giving it credit for being. And Foreman might be one of the best all-around players in the game. Obviously, I like the Vikings. You like the Rams?
No. I like the Vikings, too. I think this is the year of the Vikings because they're going to go up against the Oakland Raiders, which spills me all of a sudden because I was going to talk to you about Pittsburgh, Oakland. I've already made my prediction.
Ooh, well, I don't know if that one's going to be decided until the very last seconds either. I do like the Raiders because I've promised Snake Stabler to go with him all the way to the Super Bowl, and we're both getting too old. If he doesn't do it this year, I'm in trouble. I think the Raiders physically will match up against the Steelers, and that's about the only way to beat Pittsburgh right now. I'm going to go with the Raiders, too.
But if the Steelers play as well as they played against the Bills...
And Bradshaw plays well, it could be a different game.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, we go with the Minnesota Vikings and the Oakland Raiders. Now, Pat Summerall mailed this, his selection in to us for the Super Bowl winner. Mailed this in from a saloon somewhere, I'm sure, but Summerall picks the Atlanta Falcons, a team coming from nowhere and perhaps heading somewhere. At any rate, we won't be back next week, but we will be back next year with another season of great football action on This Week in the NFL. I still think I'm Tom Brookshire.
I'm Al Meltzer for Pat Summerall. Have a great 75.